Welcome to Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and today is the third episode with our wonderful guest who is talking about the pivotal moments that make them the leader they are today. I really hope you enjoy the episode. I can't wait to find out what's in store. Welcome to today's episode of Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. I'm Paula Eddy Wilcox, and I'm a little bit sad to say I'm joined for the last time, for now anyway, with Jimmy Burroughes. It's been absolutely awesome talking to you for the last two episodes, so I'm really excited for today. Thank you and welcome back.
Hi, Paula. Yes, third time lucky. Let's go with that. I'm sad as well. This is the last time we get to chat for now. But as you say, I think we're kindred spirits in the world of leadership.
I was going to say, I think this might be the start of a beautiful relationship. Not that I want to jump the gun, but it's been really fascinating talking to you. And the passion comes across for both of us, I think.
Yeah, fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, what we're going to be talking about today is your pivotal moments, Jimmy, because throughout our lives, we always have those moments that stand out most for us. Some people call them crucible moments, others pivotal moments, whatever you want to call it. But those moments that we go in as one person, something changes, and we come out very differently the other end, having found the strength from somewhere to get ourselves out of whatever that situation may be. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So, without further ado, I'll be quiet and please go ahead.
Oh, this is I guess where I sit now is the product of a lot of deep self-work, and I think I'm extremely privileged in terms of having the luxury to being able to indulge myself in that deep work. And so what I do now is I try and serve others who are struggling to get there through that by making it simple to understand and by maybe turning some light bulbs on in people's heads as to why some of the things they're experiencing might be happening to them. And I guess that is, that's one of my pivotal moments is moving from being the aspiring CEO. By the time I was 45, I was going to be running a big business as a CEO of an organization, to now helping and supporting other CEOs and their leadership teams who may be really struggling with burnout and desperately trying to work out how on earth do we create a high-performing team, because everything we're doing isn't working, or it's not working enough. It's not making enough of a difference to get what we need, the results we want, whatever it might be. And if I go back in and look through my career, as we spoke about in episode 1, I was an ex-army officer. Army officers are really good at putting on body armor and protecting themselves against flying bullets. And everything you're taught is around being robust and physically capable and strong. And it's not some people think it's a sort of overly macho environment. I never found that, but I did find it was a very high performing expectation of perfection was kind of the norm. It always amused me that when you were graded at the end of the year, excellent was a B. So if you were excellent throughout the year, you got a B. And so you can see the type of culture that it created, which was a high aspiration and a wonderful place to work. And I have the fondest of memories, but it is this high drive culture. But I want to go back to that body armor concept, because when I then joined the corporate world, I switched that body armor for a pinstripe suit, and that became my suit of armor. And the Jimmy that you see today is a very authentic portrayal of me. The Jimmy that was, it was a James who used to go to work in those days in a pinstripe suit and was a bit of a hard ass, the uncompromising perfectionist, the relentless driver, the high activator. And the reason I did that was because I was wearing a suit of armor to try and not show anybody my weaknesses, not show anybody my vulnerabilities. And to, if anybody wanted to come at me with a weapon or a sword or something dangerous, then I had sufficient protection that I wasn't vulnerable. And what I see now with lots of leaders is they behave in certain ways because they think they should, or because they're wearing a suit of armor. And, as you've probably gathered, I'm not a particularly hippy-dippy cross the healing type, but I have become very, very interested in the last few years in the concepts of energetics. And, the spiritual end of the spectrum talk about auras and energy and things like that. For the scientific end of the spectrum, we can talk about Newtonian physics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. And I believe that the universe is essentially taken a little spoonful of energy and popped it into you, and that's your soul, and that's what's going around inside your body. And if you imagine it like a light bulb inside your chest, your light shines with your authenticity. And so those leaders that are out there wearing a suit of armor, nobody can see your light, and your light can't get out. And so often with the analogy we use is when you're burning out, it's because you're trying so hard. You've turned your light bulb up to 11, but all that heat and it's all being trapped inside. It can't get out. And you're not sharing any energy in terms of developing others, delegation, support. You're not vulnerable. You can't transfer energy with anybody effectively because you've got this great big suit of metal armor in front of you that's blocking all of that energetic flow. Nothing can get in, nothing can get out. You're just heating up and burning out. And I think that the real pivotal moment for me was realizing that it was okay to take that suit of armor off and just be Jimmy. And Jimmy's pretty awesome. Many people have told me this, and I've started to believe it myself, not in an arrogant way or a sort of self-important way, but I have my value, and my value is there for people who want to use it, not necessarily going to work for everybody. And that's also okay, because the energy that I can give is there to be is going to be received by the people who want it, by the kindred spirits, by the people who want change, by the people who are really struggling. And like, I tried the high performing teams program, I tried leadership coaching, I've had a high performance coach for a while, I've done all of the programs that you can possibly buy. None of it's working for me. I'm really struggling, and I can go, well, hey, why don't we look at this from a perspective of, I'll get in alongside you and I'll see what you're seeing from your perspective based on my experiences, and I'll maybe show you something that you haven't seen before. That's my pivotal moment, where I realized that that's how you can really help leadership teams. That's how you can really support them, just by taking that suit of armor off and being a bit more authentic and a bit more human. And I share a lot of my stories. I'm not ashamed of anything that I've gone through, because all of those things have given me the gifts that have allowed me to get to here today.
What a wonderful way to talk about it. How we are almost blocking ourselves from being the best version of ourselves, so that shining light that's inside of us, that ball of energy that is our soul, if that's what a lovely way to talk about it. Being able to feel able to show our true selves takes some time for a lot of people, because we're all so conditioned. Certainly in the sort of British culture growing up, it was, well, I even remember children should be seen but not heard, don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
Who on earth came up with that? I don't know. But anyway, as kids, it was be quiet, don't say anything, behave yourself, and we're all sort of put in this box. And for those poor kids that couldn't quite fit into the box, they were seen as unruly and naughty and dismissed by society. So right from kids, we're piling on the expectations. So I know that influenced, for a start, the way that I chose to bring up my daughter, because that was never going to happen. She wasn't going to be shoved into some box and told that that's the way to behave and what have you. She completed her last GCSE today. She's 16.
Oh, wow.
And she came home absolutely bouncing with her two friends from school. Like, we finished. And, throughout the 4 weeks of the exams, there's been days where she's like, oh, that went terribly and I've probably failed. And I said, it will be what it will be. I said, but don't put yourself in that box, if you like, to say that you failed. You don't know. You just don't know. And I remember back then, there were times when I came out of the exam and went, well, that was terrible, I'll just write that off, and then I actually passed. I said, so you just don't know. But I really don't believe in that sort of putting people into boxes and saying you've got to do this, that's the way you've got to behave. So being able to help people to become the best versions of themselves and understand that it's okay to show a bit of vulnerability. It's okay to share your stories. It's okay for me to show up in a team and say, yes, I might be leading your team, but actually you three over there out of the 10 of us are much better at this thing than I am. So please come help, because I need your expertise to support the greater good of the team. This isn't about, the person that's leading the team looking amazing. It's about how do we make all of us look amazing and achieve amazing things together.
Agree. So many places we could go with this. And and congratulations to your daughter, by the way. What a wonderful day. I hope you're going to go and celebrate in style after this.
She's gone to stay with her friends, so we're doing that on Sunday. We're going to have a celebration on Sunday.
Exciting. There's a couple of things that came up for me while you were talking. I was like, yes, we should definitely go and talk about that. The first one is the need to be the expert and the infallible superhero or the always on leader. One of the things I remember back to my corporate days is I worked harder and longer than anybody else in the team, and was known for, Jimmy's always sending emails at 3 a.m. and would send emails late at night. And that created a culture of burnout in my team because I was always on sending emails because I felt like it had to be. Then people would receive emails from me as they woke up in the morning and feel like they had to respond, which would create more emails, which would create more emails, which would create more email. And you can see where we're going with this, right? So if you're that leader that is always needing to be on or always being the expert, you're actually creating a lot of work for yourself, but you're also creating work for others. And letting go can be really, really rewarding. And we go back to that conversation we had earlier, which was where there's a source of tension is where you should pay attention. And the one for I feel unsafe if I'm not the expert is definitely one that I recommend paying attention to. And then you go, well, how do you be more vulnerable? Because we're always told good leaders are vulnerable, but vulnerability can be really uncomfortable. And I'm a scuba diver. It's one of my great hobbies. And when people learn to scuba dive, that's a pretty vulnerable place, right? You're doing something that's completely unnatural, breathing underwater. And so what you do is first of all, you learn how to put the gear together, standing on the side of a swimming pool. And then you jump in the shallow end and you learn to put your face in the water. And then you gradually go into the deep end and you kneel down. And then when you're kind of competent enough to be able to use the gear effectively, then you go in the ocean and then you go down deeper and deeper and deeper. What would be super dangerous and scary is if you suddenly said, right, everybody get your gear, you've never dived before, and we're going to go to 40 meters. Because people will be terrified, including you, because are you able to keep those people safe? Are you able to get them down and back up again safely? Chances are possibly not. And vulnerability is very similar. If you're going to start being vulnerable with your team, we don't expect you to go to 40 meters. You're not there to share your deepest, darkest secrets. But a great vulnerability starter question could be something like, okay, team, I've got some ideas. I wonder who else has got some ideas, or what have I missed? Or is there anybody got anything they can build on what I've just shared? Really lovely vulnerability questions. And there's some fantastic research around the field of vulnerability from a guy called Daniel Coyle, who talks about what we call a vulnerability loop. So it's, I'll be vulnerable with you. You notice it and be vulnerable back with me, and I'll continue to be vulnerable with you. And over time, we can almost like helter-skelter down into deeper levels of vulnerability. But if we jump in the ocean and go to 40 meters, first of all, people are going to be scared. People are going to be uncertain. People are going to be unskilled. And if something goes wrong at that depth of vulnerability, it's pretty tough to get back. And if you come up too quick, you obviously get the bends, and it can be even more dangerous. So what we want to do as leaders is go, yes, start being vulnerable, but start being vulnerable in a very shallow, on the edge of the pool or in the shallow end way. and work your way down gradually.
Yeah.
The
It is dipping your toe in, isn't it, Jimmy? You're
100%.
absolutely right. Because, I heard a lovely recount from a fellow coach yesterday, in fact, at an event. They were talking about how they'd gone on, your typical 2-day away day or team away, where it's a bit of strategy and some team building, and she was like, how can I make this more, how can I get the team to be more cohesive, understand each other better and gel better? Not just by doing a trust fall exercise or whatever it might be, which is so last year.
Last millennium, I think we were talking.
Yeah, quite. But it was just interesting listening to her and her thought process of what had gone through her mind, all the things that she considered, and she ended up suggesting a 2-hour session where they brought in an external coach facilitator and did what we're talking about here, really, a bit of a vulnerability session where they each shared a story. And really all the facilitators sort of started off, introduced the session, just said, so who would like to go first? And she said, I'll go first. I'm the one that's kind of suggested it, so I'll go first. And she shared this very vulnerable story, which I won't share here. It's not my story to share. But then she had to choose who went next and so on and so forth around the room. Because she went first, it really set the tone for the rest of the team. And when they'd finished the session, everybody agreed, and one person said it, but everyone else was chipping in as they were saying it. I'm so pleased you suggested to do this, because we were all like, what are you talking about? What's this going to do for us? Secondly, thank you so much for going first, because you really helped us understand what it means to be vulnerable and how we are in this safe space to be able to do that together. And it was just, just hearing her recount the story about what happened in that time with the team was goosebumps enough. But it did make me think about times where I've done that with teams in the past. And it's very powerful to share that moment together, obviously contracting for it up front to make sure that you're psychologically safe and you're going to keep that confidentiality between you. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, the Vegas rule, all that good stuff. But it can be life-changing for a team. It can really gel them in a very, very different way.
I completely agree. A lot of the work we do in the Ways of Working program, which is what we work on with organizations, is around building trust and connection first. Yeah. Trust, connection, and purpose are the 3 pillars of the program.
Yeah.
And the mechanism into creating trust and connection is critical to get right as a team. And I admire a team that can go into a room and do a really vulnerable story sharing session. Some teams are nowhere close to that. Some teams that we meet are, it's a bunch of very disconnected, very low trust, very skeptical individuals who are thrown together. Sometimes they might not even be a team. There could be a working group.
Yeah.
And so you as the leader, yes, you need to set the tone. Yes, you need to try and lead people into a vulnerable space, but the level of depth you go to in your first few forays here, don't expect people to be sharing their deepest, darkest stories on day one. Equally, share without any expectation of anybody saying anything either. So you could share your deepest, darkest story if you're comfortable, and if nobody else is comfortable to share, then that's the end of the session, right? If you make it a little bit less, if you make the stakes lower, and this is why I recommend those questions of what have I missed, who can add to that. That's showing vulnerability, like saying, I don't know all the answers here. Who can contribute? Then maybe work your way down to this is my biggest fear or my biggest worry or my biggest secret that I've never told anybody. and people will go with you gradually,
Yeah,
especially if you do that really authentically, because there is a danger, of course, that it becomes the forced fun, becomes the forced vulnerability. We're all going to share our deep stories, and people are like, I don't really feel comfortable with that. I'm not okay with that. Whereas if we get there together, it can be a lot nicer for the connection to happen. So we have a very carefully facilitated entry point to building connection with people, which is starts nice and low stakes, commonsensically simple, and we deepen as we go through the program to make sure by the end of it, people are like, wow, we actually know quite a lot about each other and we're quite vulnerable with each other. But on day one, everybody sat back with their arms folded, and the typical start point of many a program. And that's, I'm talking extremes here, but the reality is, as a leader, we don't expect you to go there. And I think you'd agree with me, Paula. We don't expect you to go there on day one.
Oh gosh,
it's just it's easing your way into it nicely when you and the team are ready. And the team will pick up if you're not being authentic about it. The team will pick up if you're forcing them into forced vulnerability, and they won't play with you.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. And I mean, this example that I gave, that team was in that place to be able to do that.
Fantastic.
As the leader, when you start this journey together with your team, you've got to be able to read the room and know what's appropriate in that moment. So that appropriate vulnerability, if you like. So that lovely example of just, okay, so I'm struggling with this at the minute. Who's got ideas that could help me? Because I don't think I've got all the answers. That's a great place to start, because it's something where they feel they're adding value and helping you, but they can see that you've asked for that help. That's very different to, 6 years ago this happened and it went on for a year and it was whatever it might have been, and it took its toll, and a totally different, deep, personal crucible moment, if you like.
Yep.
That you might choose to share at a later time when you're in a very different place with that team and you've built that trust and so on. And you're way beyond the trustful.
The other thing that is a common mistake that leaders make when they're doing their offsites and their away days and their team meetings is that we've got 30 minutes to do vulnerability and then we need to talk about budgets. And again, I understand why it happens. We're in a busy business. We've got a lot to get through. There's a big agenda. And so we're going to do the people stuff for 30 minutes and we'll tick that one off and then we'll move on to the next thing. And again, your team will struggle if you take, it's like, it's that equivalent of scuba diving again. If you take them down to 40 meters and then go, cool, dive's over. And everybody's like, oh, there's a massive cognitive jolt before they come back to the surface. Or if you surface them too quickly, we get the bends. There's some health implications. And so being mindful, if you're doing vulnerability, trust and connection, and we spend a whole day with a team just working on those two things at the start of the program to make sure that people are ready for the rest of the stuff. It's not something you can squeeze into the agenda and tick off. It needs the appropriate level of investment to warm people up to go on that dive and to surface safely before you move into the next piece. And so just making sure you're allocating sufficient time, space, and mental energy, and giving people some recovery time, because being vulnerable when you're not vulnerable naturally, when you've been in that protective state for a long period of time, when you're wearing your suit of armor, to suddenly go, oh, I'll take these shackles off. And it's taken me years of work to get to this point. To expect me to do that in an offsite and then bounce back into budgets and cognitive thinking is potentially risky for them and for the team in the longer term. So just be really mindful of that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great call out, Jimmy, because, over the years in various teams that I've been part of where I'm not the leader, that's happened, where you're expected to do this sort of deep work together for the 30-minute slot that they've given it, and then you're back onto business as usual and what have you. I was part of a team sort of away day, if you like, fairly recently, and there were lots of things on the agenda, but it was pitched that actually we may well have all sorts of things that pop up for us, and that yes, we've got all these things on the agenda, but if if some or none of it's covered, it doesn't matter. This is what we'd like to do. And as it happens, we never got off the first item, which was sharing stuff and all sorts of great stuff, because, you know, so rarely do they get together as a team. And it's what they needed in the moment. So
Exactly.
what I'd say to people is, if you put an agenda together, great, but don't expect to get through it all at speed, especially where you've got things that are considered to be more touchy-feely side of building your team. But that really is the important stuff. And if you can get that right, build that trust, that psychological safety, then the other stuff follows, because people are more committed as a result. They're more invested personally as a result, and therefore you will start to see that filter through into the strategy, into the deliverables, etc., etc.
Yep, I completely agree. And you know, if I go back to the program that we run, the 3 pillars of the program are trust, connection, and purpose, and that builds winning organizations. It doesn't say budgeting, profits, productivity, strategy. It doesn't talk about any of those things. And yet magically, when we build strong trust, when we build strong connection, and we get very, very clear on purpose, all of those other things, they're smart people that work for you, right? So they will deliver that. And when I talk to CEOs and senior leadership teams about going on their offsite, I'm like, okay, well, focus at least half of your agenda on building trust, connection, and clarifying purpose for your organization, for your division, for your business unit. And then if there's some time left, get into the tactics, because when people are trusting and connected to each other, and when they are clear on purpose, they'll book a meeting to go and talk about that stuff outside your offsite. You as a leadership team need to focus on leading whatever level of the business you're at, whether it's leading the organization or leading the team. The leadership team has to be connected to make it work.
Yeah, such powerful stuff, and fascinating to talk about it. And you know, what's one of your favorite sort of transformations that you've seen in a team recently, if you don't mind sharing? You might, because I bet you've seen some fascinating stuff without giving away any confidences, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh goodness. So there's probably a fun example I can give, because there's lots of different teams that we've worked with, a couple of hundred teams now over the years. But there was one organization I worked with up in the US, and I remember on day one of the meeting, initially there's a lot of pushback. So why were these 3 teams being put in the same room? So we were taking a full business unit of an organization, and it was made up of 3 separate kind of subunits. And initially there was like, oh, well, can we do our sessions separately? And we don't really see why we need to be in the room with them. And on day one, there were 3 tables, 3 teams all sat at their own tables. Lots of very skeptical. Well, but you know, that doesn't. Our team's different to that, and we don't really do that. And if they would fix that thing over there, that would make it easier for us. And you know, we're just so siloed, and they're the enemy. You know, there's lots of that kind of vibe when you walked into the room, and there was the heavy resistance to doing these sessions together. And then over the 3-4 months that we did sessions with them, our program is running in 3 modules with a diagnostic at either end. And so by the time we got to the end of the 3rd module, which is a day together, it was we should get them into our meeting to have a conversation about this, and how can we make sure that you know about what we talk about, and I've got this thing coming up, and I think it'd be really great if somebody from your team could come along with us. And you could just see the dynamic change. And of course, the business results were reflecting the same thing. So it was a team that was struggling to perform to a team that moved to double-digit growth in terms. It was a sales team, so they were moving to sales and sales success. But it was so interesting to me that the strategy didn't really change. The numbers didn't change in terms of what they were gunning for, but their likelihood of achieving both those things was far more significant, because they had spent the time building trust, connection, and purpose, getting clear on some things, connecting with each other, and really starting to talk to each other, and therefore collectively harnessing horsepower. And the analogy I use is, it was like there were 40 people sat in a long canoe, all paddling in different directions, well, the boat was just spinning in circles, lots of energy being expended, not a lot happening, versus a boat that's on the Oxford-Cambridge boat race where it's high-performing rowers who were all in perfect time, in unison and pulling together in the same direction. And of course, they were going to win the race.
Oh, gives me goosebumps hearing that, Jimmy, because it's so exciting and a real privilege for the sort of work that we do to be able to see that transformation and help them to do it for themselves. And, thank you for sharing that example. And it is a fun example and lovely to hear that result, that they're all chattering and how can we get them involved and how can we collaborate better, get that communication going, make those real connections that last and are valued by everybody on the team. So it sounds like you did an awesome job with that, because what a fantastic
it's
result.
what we get out of bed for, right? It's why we do what we do.
Absolutely. Honestly, the day that I really connected with my purpose, because, for years you think you know why you go to work. For some people it might just be to earn money. It never was for me. It was, I always thought I love helping people. That's why I go to work. But no, it's so much deeper than that. And when you really do the work to understand what your true purpose is, why you get out of bed in the morning, and you can do that as an individual and then bring that to the team and do it together as a team, it can be really, really powerful stuff.
100% aligned.
Excellent. Glad we're aligned. But, as always, and as per the last 2 episodes, what a lot of value and insight you've shared with us, and superb leadership wisdom. Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Thank you.
This is the last time I'm going to speak for a little while anyway, but I know that the listeners have so much to take away from this. Each one of them, as we've said before, are unique, so they'll all take away something different, but there is definitely something in there for all the sorts of leaders that we have in our lives, to help hone their leadership journey and be able to take their armour off and shine their own light as bright as they possibly can and sharp as to who they really want to be. So thank you very, very much for sharing everything that you have. It's so appreciated.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to just come and share the thing that gets me up in the morning, the thing that lights my fire and makes my life worth living. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks, and bye for now, Jimmy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. This has been the 3rd episode and final episode for a little while anyway, with our guest, who shared their pivotal moments that make them the leader they are today. Again, I talk about uniqueness a lot. Every guest story and their pivotal moments, the challenges they faced, the issues they faced over the years to get to where they are now, and how they pulled themselves through all of that, makes them the leader they are today, and each one of those stories is unique and different. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with them and see what that meant for them. Now, once again, it's your turn to reflect on what you've heard today, see what resonates for you, and think about what that might mean for your leadership moving forwards. I'm Paula Eddie Wilcox, and I look forward to welcoming you back next time on Game of Leadership, the podcast for curious leaders. Bye for now.